All right, as folks start to come into the room, just give you a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all to this discussion, an overview of the IEP designation process and the benefits of the IEP designation. My name is Tim Hines. I'm the Executive Director of UEDA, and I'll introduce kind of our team presenting today. But for some housekeeping items, I wanted to just let you know that you can use the Q&A function that's at the bottom of the Zoom panel that we're all probably well familiar with at this point. To ask any questions, we'll have time for questions at the end for both Sean and myself, and I'm happy to answer those at that time. But please ask them throughout. You know, as you have the question, please feel free to ask it throughout. And even if we answer it, we'll cover it again as part of our Q&A period. If you have any problems or issues, you can use that Q&A function. Technical problems, you can use that Q&A function, and/or you can also use the chat feature to talk directly to me. We are recording the webinar today. Everyone is on mute except for our panelists, who will unmute themselves. We're recording it, so if you do need to share it with other people, please feel free to do so. We also have seen a number of organizations taking advantage of utilizing the IEP designation as a way to bring regional ecosystems together. So if by chance you think this is something that you'd like to approach from a regional perspective, wherein there's multiple institutions participating in the program at once, we're more than happy to do a dedicated webinar specifically for your region and talk one-on-one with your region. So please keep that in mind. You can reach out to me directly if you have any interest in doing that. And with me today is Sean McMillan. Sean's the Director of the Office of Economic Development for the University of Georgia, and he also serves as the chair of our Member Value Committee and serves on the Board of Directors for UEDA. He's also coordinating the Georgia Economic Development Association conference that's taking place right alongside our UEDA Summit next fall, this coming fall. Sean's integral in that. But why Sean is uniquely poised to talk about this IEP designation topic, not only in his role as the Member Value Committee chair, where this is kind of housed within the structure of UEDA. His position was created as a result of the University of Georgia going through the IEP designation process. They went through the process prior to his arrival, decided that they needed someone to manage this on an ongoing effort, and the economic engagement of the University of Georgia on an ongoing effort. His role was created as a result of the IEP designation. So, and the institution has also gone through their five-year plan, or I guess a review. So Sean can speak to that as well. So, you know, Sean, thank you for being here today. I know we've got some slides coming up later on that you'll hit on, and I'll introduce you again then. Just a brief overview of what we're going to cover today. I said that this is housed within the Member Value Committee, and they manage a program called Ueda Plus, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll also get into a bit about the IEP designation, what it is. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about why designation is important and what you can expect in going through the designation with your institution, and then how to get started ultimately. This is a designation that's been around for a little while now. It's a well-respected designation program, and of course, it's an APLU administered program by the Association of Public Land-Grant Universities, and UEDA is providing access to that program as a result of our partnership with them, and we're thrilled to do that and thrilled to continue to partner with them on this effort. So just a quick introduction to UEDA for those of you who might not be familiar with us that might be on the call. We represent our members, which include higher education institutions, private sector businesses, as well as economic development organizations, and we work to provide them resources that help facilitate growth within their communities. UEDA members represent all of those who are on the cutting edge of modern economic development, and the 21st century economy has evolved into an entity that behaves much differently than its predecessors. Attracting established industry really is no longer a viable option for sustaining economic growth. So we've really focused on the areas of talent, innovation, and place as drivers of the modern economy. It's about innovation, it's about entrepreneurship, it's about fostering talent, young people, from preschool through life, to embolden them to think creatively and outside the traditional means. And never before has academia, the private sector, and economic development stakeholders been so reliant on one another to create economic opportunity. And that's something that that's a phrase that I've utilized for years in kind of giving introductions to our webinars. But now more than ever, I truly mean that coming out of this pandemic, it's going to be reliant upon academia, the private sector, and economic stakeholders to really work together to drive that forward. And UEDA, we see ourselves in a very important and pivotal role in working to do that. And I think the IEP designation is a great way to start that process, leveraging talent, innovation in place, and working to recognize the interconnectedness of all of those pieces. So I mentioned that UEDA has this program called UEDA Plus. And UEDA Plus is really just an access to external opportunities. So think of it as our discount program, access to other things. And one of those things that we provide access to is the IEP designation through APLU. The IEP designation traditionally has been just for APLU members. And APLU members have a specific defined criteria in order to be a member, whereas UEDA is more open to community colleges and 2-year, 4-year institutions. Anyone can participate in UEDA, which allows for access into the IEP designation. But our program provides that access to discounts, and it's to products and services throughout the association. So if you're a member of UEDA, you have access to the UEDA Plus program. And it's available to all contacts at the institution. UEDA membership is institution-wide. So as long as you are at a single branch campus or a single location, everyone at that location is able to access UEDA Plus, as well as all the benefits of the UEDA membership. So here's kind of how it works. APLU puts on the IEP designation. And it's important that that designation, because of the respect that it has, maintains its home at APLU. They've perfected the process. It's important that everyone that goes through that process is doing the exact same process throughout. So we want that designation to be consistent. Cohorts in the IEP program will contain both APLU and UEDA members. So the only difference now is that the program is now available to non-APLU members through UEDA. And that's really the only difference in the program. It's the same program, same designation. The only real difference is going to be coming down to whenever UEDA members start timing into the awards program for the IEP designation. And likely that process will be separate. But for the designation process, it's identical to the APLU process because it's the exact same process. So I want to talk a little bit about the designation, and I'm actually going to ask Sean to take over from here and give us some insight into not only University of Georgia and some of the lessons that they've learned throughout the process, but also just really highlight what that process is and what is the designation and why it's important. So Sean, I'll let you take over.
Tim, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you today. It's really exciting to talk about the IEP process. And as you pointed out in the intro, my office was created as a result of the university going through the process back in 2013. For us, it was an 8-month journey, which began in January of 2013 and ended in August. And it was to me, being a part of the 5-year update, it really gave me an opportunity to look back and see what the university landed on. 3 principles that were at the core of our initial submission, and to look back 5 years later and to see the progress that the university had made in those areas that were very important to both external and internal stakeholders was really amazing. And it was a very healthy process to go through for our university back now a year and a half ago. Tim, if you can advance the slide, I can talk about our journey as we go through these next 6 slides, or perhaps I can wait until the end and synthesize down in 5 to 7 minutes, 8 months worth of work, if that would be beneficial to those that are on the call. but just basically going through what the designation involves, it's a rigorous, to me, is a rigorous self-study of the economic engagement efforts of a university or a college, including input from the external stakeholders that are extremely important to your operations. It gives you much more, to me, than a SWOT analysis, the opportunity to identify engagement gaps and areas for growth and improvement through the development of an improvement plan. And central to that fourth bullet point, in my personal humble opinion, is that it gives those that are engaged, whether it's community-based economic development or technology-based economic development, the opportunity for greater collaboration, partnerships, getting to know one another personally, and really building a strong team across campus. To me, that is one of the most important things internally that I see that comes as a result of the IEP. It really does knock silos down. And then externally, same sort of thing. I mean, as Tim pointed out, I mean, we're very much engaged with our state economic development department, our Department of Community Affairs, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the Atlanta Metro Chamber of Commerce, and the Georgia Economic Developers Association, and local economic developers across our state. And it really, I think, is as a land grant, is critical that we do that and make sure that we're touching all 159 of our counties and its citizens. So, so the IEP was created for the APLU members, but is definitely open to all institutions through the Ueda Plus program. And so some of the some of the universities that have applied for and earned the designation are right in front of you. Recognizable names, I think, Tim, were there 60 designees thus far? Maybe I'm behind in the numbers.
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button, but yeah, it's more than 60 at this point. Yeah, and added to this list, we had the first institution that was that went through the UEDA access, so through UEDA Plus, so a non-APLU member, however you want to say it, but that's Western Washington University. They went through the process and were designated last year. So congrats to them as being the first through our portal.
Gotcha. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I'll get into this if we have time and sort of talk about our journey, but the internal benefits of designation to the administration, I think it definitely provides greater visibility of engagement to those upstream. It also encourages economic engagement throughout the institution. And I think that, going back to what I said earlier about greater collaboration, with us, we've had the term economic development woven into our university's strategic plan. You hear much more commentary from our deans and others these days talking about economic development, whether it's community-based or technology-based. So it's really been something that has changed the vernacular of our university, and something that we're very proud of, and I think people sort of quote unquote get it. So some of the benefits to practitioners there on your right, it's encouraging economic engagement throughout the institution, creating buy-in of challenges and opportunities for sure, and organizational identification of strengths and also weaknesses. So it truly is a great process to go through. So Tim, next slide, please. And so externally, definitely for administration, it provides greater visibility of engagement to partners and external stakeholders, and proves the value to the institution, of the institution to regional engagement. And for practitioners, it I think provides greater awareness and a connection to those both nationally and internationally that are in the same business, and provides access to best practice elements. In a couple of examples here, K-State, is highlighted on their website, and in fact that they're proud of the fact that they've been designated as an IEP institution. And same thing with Purdue. I mean, I think that it's like anything, you put a lot of effort into it, and you certainly want to make sure that you're communicating the fact that you've earned such a great designation for your university. So 2 great examples there.
Thanks, Sean. Did you want to highlight anything else about University of Georgia and how your experience has played out before we get into the actual process itself?
Yeah, I'd be glad to, Tim. And this might take 5 or 7 minutes to go through. But again, as I said, I mean, I'll try to cram 8 months worth of work into a short period of time. But just to give everyone an idea of what the process looks like, at least from my perspective, there are really 3 elements, starting with the process narrative, and then case studies, and then finally the growth and improvement plan. For us, the president gave his blessings on January 10th of 2013 to create an internal working group. This working group was representative of those in community and technology-based economic development across campus, with support from the vice presidents for research, instruction, and public service and outreach. The working group, once it was charged, decided to base its participation on 3 fundamental concepts that were applicable to the IEP process, which were innovation, economic engagement, and economic development. The team then decided that they would create a survey, but the survey did closely follow the protocol laid out by APLU, SICEP, in order to produce data and outcomes derived from an objective tool. So the university deployed a survey for 10 days, beginning January 23rd and ending February 1st, sent first to an internal cohort of 275 EGA economic development practitioners, research faculty, outreach faculty, students, technology commercialization staff, incubator staff, it just goes on, small business development center staff, and campus administrators. From that group, we had a 55% response rate. And then externally, invitations were sent out to 3,000 individuals, including the Georgia Economic Developers Association, the Georgia Municipal Association, and the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. Surveys were also sent directly to the staff of the Georgia Department of Economic Development, the University System of Georgia's Chancellor's Office, UGA incubator companies, and UGA affiliated companies. So from that cohort, we received a 20% response rate. And so once the data was tabulated, we really came up with, the data identified 3 primary areas where UGA could improve his performance. Number 1 was partnering for economic growth. Number 2 is facilitating interactions between the public and the university. And lastly, is communicating economic development contributions. These, again, were the 3 primary areas where when we did our 5-year update, we went back and said, what was it that we said we were going to do? And again, as I said, we were pleasantly surprised that 90% or more of those things that we laid out to do, we did. So then the next sort of step in the process was having a regional stakeholder meeting. It was a 1-day event in March of 2013. And we were able to pull together a group of 150 people and assembled them in a facilitated discussion around asking 3 questions. Where are we? What do we, where do we need to go? And what must we do to get there? And it was interesting, from that discussion, 3 structural changes were identified that really sort of led us to kind of getting into some changes, which Tim had mentioned. We opened the Economic Development Office in Atlanta. to increase visibility with the economic development community in Atlanta businesses and government sectors. We hired a university industry liaison and changed the reporting structure for the Economic Development Office to report jointly to the Vice President for Research and the Vice President for Public Service and Outreach. And that change basically was mandated by the President as a result of the IEP process. Yeah, so as Tim had mentioned, one of the things that we wanted to do too was make sure we were advancing university economic engagement. So in addition to involvement with the APLU SICEP program, UGA is a member of the University Economic Development Association, the Georgia Economic Developers Association, and the Georgia Research Alliance. We have representatives, me, on the Georgia Department of Economic Development's Advisory Board, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, Georgia Bio, and the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. So, through all of those ways, we're actively engaging and promoting the relevance and importance of universities in economic development on a regional, national, and international basis. Getting back into a couple of things that I think might be important to mention for this group would be those three elements that I mentioned earlier. So first was partnering for economic growth. So in putting our growth and improvement plan together and going back to some of the survey responses that we received. So around that concept, internal participants shared concerns about streamlining the contract and approval process for contracting with external partners. They also wanted to see stronger internal connections to foster collaboration and innovation. And finally, they wanted to focus on curriculum and course flexibility, including expansion of online offerings. The external concerns were making sure that we were aligning curricular content to match current industry-specific needs, partner with government at the federal, state, and local level to retain and grow existing businesses, ensuring that career and recruiting services partner with regional businesses and highlight professional opportunities in the region, and finally connecting economic actors across organizational boundaries to facilitate collaborations that otherwise might not occur. The second foundational objective was facilitating interactions between the public and the University of Georgia. So going back to our survey element, internal participants wanted to see that we could make it easier for faculty to learn about ways to interact with the community, and that's statewide at large community, personally and professionally. Increase the focus on industry contracts, including those involving faculty directly with industry, providing the necessary infrastructure in the research office to support faculty engagement, and finally integrating public service and outreach faculty more directly with traditional academic faculty. The external stakeholders, they wanted to see us create a stronger presence in Atlanta, which we did, to provide a one-stop website and office as a clearinghouse for resources, check the box. Aligning curriculum with market needs, yes, we're doing that. And communicating with external partners in a way they can understand by using their language, not just UGA's language. And finally, the last piece is communicating economic development contributions. Some of the internal concerns there were decentralizing communication distribution. They wanted to see the beginning of a weekly newsletter, brown bag luncheons, and/or an annual event that rewards successful efforts in innovation and economic development, and recognizing the importance of communicating output, outcomes, and impact. And finally, I'll end with the external stakeholders and their thoughts. They wanted to see UGA better speak the language of non-academics, especially with business and industry. They wanted to see communication training for university employees so they can convey their economic development commitments effectively. Targeted stories to multiple audiences using different methods of dissemination. And finally, using potentially external consultants and contractors to develop and disseminate marketing materials and other means of communication. So a lot said in a 5 minutes or so, but that really is the core of our process. And has, again, those last 3 foundational elements have carried forward now 7 years into the future. And hopefully that will be helpful to those of you on the call that are considering the IEP designation. Tim, that's all I have there.
Great, thanks, Sean. I'm sure we'll have some questions about it as we move forward. And just a reminder that if you do have questions, don't forget to type those into the Q&A function or send me a chat message through the chat function, and we'll get going with those questions in a few minutes here. So, this is a detailed process, and it is a labor of love. But I think in the end, really having that designation and that feather in the cap for the institution to show and demonstrate the connectedness to to economic development within their regions is so important. It's a critical designation, especially one of the questions I get all the time is how can I make sure that my institution's more relevant, and how can I better tell the story of our institution? And this is a perfect way to do that through this designation, through the process of going through the designation, and then through earning the designation itself. There's no better way to demonstrate the value of institutions of higher education than through the IEP designation. So that's why it's so important, and why we're happy to partner with APLU to bring it to everyone. So what can you expect? So we kind of have split this into 5 different areas, or 5 different sections. So of course we have intent, which everyone's in right now. We have pre-designation process. With the designation process, you have your interim reports, and then you have the renewal. So I'm going to take you through each of those and what you can kind of expect along the way, and let you know some deadlines, particularly around the intent and the pre-designation process that we have. So first, for intent, so this is the period of time where you learn about the IEP designation. Everyone is in this phase right now, so congratulations. You're learning about the IEP designation. Perhaps you'll share this information with colleagues. Oftentimes, this requires some level of escalation up the higher education ladder. The letter of intent needs to be signed by the university president or chancellor. So, this is the time where we're in right now, in this intent period. So you do need to perhaps share that letter of intent or complete that letter of intent with leadership. And then one of the things I'm gonna do this year and change it up is I'm gonna not only give you the letter of intent, but I'm also gonna give you a sample of the agreement. One of the things we found is some delays in internal reviews of anything that any type of agreement that extends periods of time, and this is an agreement that extends for 10 years. So we want to give institutions enough time to prepare for that. So step 1 is to reach out to me as executive director. I will give you a letter of intent template, very simple to fill out, and I will give you the agreement. And within your institution, having the buy-in of university leadership will be important to facilitate those items. I'll help you through the process. Again, if we need to have a call, that's another portion of this that we've added this year, as we try to make ourselves more available. We want to learn about the goals of the institution. We want to understand where you're at as an institution, and it's important for us to learn that up front. So whenever the institution's ready, one of the things that we ask you to do is to reach out to me again, and we have a joint call with APLU. There are some folks that are coming to this as new individuals and institutions that have not experienced UEDA before. So we want to make sure that you're on board with UEDA and what we're about, and have the opportunity to learn about that, but then also to engage in the IEP designation process. So this intent period is pretty important. It's the longest period of all of this because it tends to take some time for institutions to gear up. There's some fees for those going through the process that we'll talk about. So that's why we really want to try to help you through that process, both UEDA and APLU. So reach out to us if you are interested. If you're moderately interested, if you might need some collateral to help support it, if you need to have a separate conversation to say, hey, I'd really like our our institution to hear from UEDA and APLU. We're happy to do that. So pre-designation process. So as soon as you sign that letter of intent, sign the agreement, and make your initial payment, you join the next cohort. So cohorts start once a year. So in order for you to start in 2021, at the beginning of 2021, you have to have your letter of intent in this year. And you have to have the payment in, you have to have the agreement in. All of that has to happen within this year. So so this is all preparation for next year. So I told you it's a long process, and we've learned over the past 2 years that it is a long process. Sometimes in selling that to the institution, everyone needs to be on board. It's a dedicated process, valuable process, but you do have to be dedicated to it. So you prepare for your self-study. You can submit your self-study for comment. You can submit your self-study for designation. So the various pieces for that, let's, you know, I want to dig into this self-study a little bit after you join the cohort, because this is a major piece of the process. So the self-study is an application, and it's approximately 20 to 30 pages if you want to equate a page length to it. And it's a narrative description of the self-study process and the entire university economic enterprise. There's identification of 3 areas of university accomplishment and economic engagement, including information about evidence of accomplishment, and identification of 3 areas of growth and improvement in economic engagement, including information and evidence needed for growth and improvement. And the application form's online. It allows for the addition of hyperlinks, and photos and documents can be added as attachments. So 1 month prior to the application deadline, you have to confirm your plans to submit through APLU, and you can submit for either comment only or for decision. We recommend that you have at least 1 submission for comment. You have 3 years to complete this self-study, as you'll find out. So it's a 3-year ramp-up period as you're conducting the self-study, as you're getting it down. So you have plenty of time, hopefully, to submit for comment. So we really encourage you to submit for comment. We'll lead you down that path, and then you'll get some feedback on your self-study that allow you to then perhaps make some adjustments, and then submit it again for decision. And then if you wait, if you do submit for comment, or if you do submit for decision and it's not decided upon or not decided upon favorably, and there's you have to wait additional submission cycles in order to resubmit again. So the key is to do it for comment, get your feedback, and then submit it for designation after that. New designees will then receive, after their designation, communications assistance regarding their status, will be honored in a ceremony at the UEDA Summit, and again will be eligible to apply for the UEDA IEP awards once we've initiated those. Again, the entire process is the same. We will recognize those on stage at our events, and APLU will recognize APLU members on stage at their events. So that's the self-study process. Again, as part of this self-study and joining the cohort, it's still part of this pre-designation process. You join the cohort, you begin the self-study. You also get to participate in the IEP Learning Exchange, and you have that opportunity to learn from. It's a group that is going through the IEP process as well as has already gone through the IEP process. You get to learn about one another's economic engagement activities, which range from online discussion forums to webinars to participation in special events and visibility opportunities, Capitol Hill with federal agencies and so forth. So this learning exchange is a robust opportunity to expand your knowledge of economic engagement beyond just within your institution or within your ecosystem. It allows you to explore what's going on nationally with other institutions and interact and exchange ideas within that network. So it gives you access to that network from the pre-designation process on once you join the cohort. So that gets into designation. So once you're designated and you've submitted your self-study and it's approved and you are designated, step 1 is to celebrate. But designation also starts your clock. So whenever I say, later on, I'm going to get into some timeline options. When I talk about timeline, whenever your designation day is, that's whenever your clock starts at 0. So you have pre-designation process, you can take anywhere from 1 to 3 years to go through. The designation process is when your clock starts at 0. So that'll be important later on. So just remember that. And we'll recognize those new designees at our annual summit each year. But then from this point on, once you're designated, you do have the opportunity to apply for the IEP awards. We have not set criteria for those yet. We have one designee right now in Western Washington, like I mentioned to you. So once we have some strength in numbers, we'll create an awards process and program that mirrors very similar to the APLU process and program for their awards. So after designation, there is an interim report that has to be completed, and that happens at the 5-year interval. At that point, you'll explore any changes in economic engagement enterprise since then. You'll take a look and describe the progress that have been made on growth and improvement plans, and perhaps even identify new opportunities for growth and improvement. And you also share practices that you've gleaned through the IEP Learning Exchange. Again, you still have the opportunity to participate in an exchange throughout this whole process, as well as apply for the IEP awards. And then at 10 years, there's an application for renewal, and that application for renewal will mimic the interim report, and you will have the opportunity to renew and go through the process for another 10 years. After that second 10 years, so let's say 20 years, we figure that economies will have changed and universities will have changed enough that you have to apply through the process again and do another self-study. Of course, you can interject, studies and plans all throughout the process, but as far as the designation timeline goes, it runs for 10 years with an option to renew for another 10 years after that, before having to go through the full self-study process again. So let's take a look at this again, just to review the lengths of time. So the letter of intent, the intent period ends by the upcoming deadline. That's October 1st, which I'll share with you in a few minutes. That pre-designation process, again, takes anywhere from 1 to 3 years. But you only have 3 years to complete it, so it's a maximum of 3 years. Designation does start on day 0, so again, that'll come into importance later on. First area where it comes into play is that interim report. So year 5 doesn't start from the year you joined the cohort. Year 5 starts from the day you're designated. So that day 0 is your day 0. The interim report will be due year 5 from that day 0, and then the renewal is due year 10 from that day 0. And then similarly with the next 10 years, it all starts with that designation date of being your day 0. So what's next? Let's take a look at this year and kind of apply some of these deadlines to this year, and how you can start the process now. So number 1, and this is going on now, of course, review your IEP materials. The APLU website has them. We don't tend to duplicate those materials because they're APLU's materials, but please feel free to go to aplu.org/IEP for more information about the self-designation, or I'm sorry, the self-study process leading up to designation and other pieces of the process. They have plenty of content there for you. When you're ready, email UEDA, email me, and I'll have my contact information at the end here, that allows you to get a letter of intent, as well as an agreement. But even before that, we'd like to have a phone conversation between myself and the folks at APLU, just to talk a little bit and find a little bit more about your institution, what you might need to do for us to help you go after that designation, and we want to guide you through this pre-designation and intent process. After you do receive that letter of intent, the idea is to build your team, perhaps requesting funding, support from internal stakeholders. We mentioned a payment process, and I'll talk about that towards the end here. This is all building that internal stakeholders and even some external stakeholders to launch that self-study whenever you join the cohort next year. Again, that's in January of 2021. Your letter of intent is due to UEDA by October 1st. It'd be great if you had it in before that. Waiting towards the end definitely pushes, especially as it relates to budgets. There's definitely some some hard deadlines here, and one of them is the participation agreement and payment to UEDA. So we want to make sure, and that actually should say December 1st. That's our absolute deadline. November 1st would be great, but December 1st, we must have your participation agreement and payment in by December 1st in order for us to collect all that, get your registration fees over to APLU, and and then also ultimately have you join the cohort in January. So that has to be done by December 1st at the very minimum. And then the next cohort will start in January 2021. So there's only one opportunity annually to join a cohort. So that cohort, again, starts January 2021. And it's only once a year that you have the opportunity to join that. So this is why we start this process early and now, because it does take this long to sometimes have that conversation internally. So how much does it cost? So I'm going to show you some figures on the next slide, but recognizing too that there are enrollment-based discounts. So and those are listed at the bottom here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these fees. So for the pre-designation process, so along with your letter of intent, along with your well, you submit your letter of intent, and then your agreement and your payment, your first payment is due by December 1st. So that's that first payment. That includes the pre-designation fee. That's your IEP designation fee. That's to participate in the process, to participate in that self-study, and participate with APLU. That's $15,000. We also asked so that you maintain good status through UEDA over that 3-year period, that you pay UEDA dues over that 3-year period. And we give you a discount for paying that in a lump sum, but that's $1,900. So for larger institutions, there's a total of $16,900 that's due December 1st. You can see the enrollment-based discounts at the bottom there, and I won't go over those. But you can see those for yourself, and those will apply to the IEP fees column only. UEDA dues will remain UEDA dues. We're not marking those up or changing those at any time. Then you have your designation. So that $15,000 covers that first 3 years of that pre-designation process through the self-study, whether it takes you 1 year or whether it takes you 5 years. That handles that self-study analysis. It handles setup within the IEP learning network and engagement network, all of those pieces. Then you have your designation. So again, remember I said that's day 0. So in day 0 annually, your annual engagement after designation will be $1,000 plus any outstanding UEDA dues. That's annual. So in order to maintain your designation, you pay that $1,000 annually to maintain the designation. You maintain your good status as well as a member within UEDA for $645, and that's a consistent fee every year until the 5-year term. So at 5 years, the 5-year report's due, that interim report's due. That's $5,000, and then for that year, and then just the same UEDA dues every year. Every year it's $645, or currently it's $645. If it does go up or down, of course that would be reflected in the annual costs. The 10-year renewal, $10,000, and $645 for the UEDA dues. So the UEDA dues give you access to the program, so you have to maintain those throughout the entire process. Again, all of that whole column of IEP fees, that is all scaled based on enrollment. So as long as if you have more than 10,000 in students, that's the fee structure. Anything less than 10,000, discounts do apply there. So quick commercial. We are still, as of right now, planning our conference, UEDA Summit, coming up in Savannah, beautiful Savannah, right down by Sean, outside of Atlanta. Savannah is opening this Friday, as we know, for business. So we'll see where that lands us for our summit. Of course, we're taking everything into consideration and ensuring that we have run a safe event, and whatever that means during that period of time, we're monitoring it. But we will plan on having a summit during these dates. Hopefully it happens in Savannah and we're all in a good place. If it doesn't, we will have a backup plan. But I encourage you to not only participate in the IEP designation process and register for the summit, but also consider an award of excellence to highlight some of your best practices that are going on, as well as any call for presentations. If you want to do a full presentation, we're welcoming those right now. So with that, here's my information. Again, first step would likely be to have us have a conversation between UEDA, APLU, and your institution. And then we'll get into the letter of intent, the agreement, and then the payments beyond that. So please take down my information if you don't have it already. Happy to have those conversations and share those with you and your institutions. So with that, we're going to get started into some questions. Again, if you have questions, I see some coming in over the Q&A function, so and over the chat as well. So please use that, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And the first one is for you, Sean. Was there a particular person at UGA who championed the goal of the IEP designation and then led the charge within the internal stakeholders and partners? I think that's an important part of this process as folks are considering intent and that intent time period. Did you have someone at UGA that stood out and was championing that?
Yeah, Tim, I responded back to Beth. The person that was a champion has since retired. And what I didn't include in that sort of response back to Beth and everyone else is the fact that there was a period of change while we were going through the IEP process. There was a significant period of change. President Jerry Moorhead was the former provost, and he was basically designated as a president in July of 2013. And so Margaret Wagner Dahl, who has retired, was the former associate provost for economic development. And as I said, during the IEP submission, the associate provost position was changed to associate vice president, transferring economic development from the provost's office to the president's office. And so the position that was created that I'm in, was Director of Economic Development, was created with reporting to the VPs for Research and Public Service and Outreach as a mandate from the President.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, and as I mentioned, I mean, it's so critical to have your institutional leadership engaged in this process, and it's actually mandatory that they sign the letter, and because of the self-study, because of the level of engagement, because of the financial commitment, that's all important for university leadership to understand that the university is committed to that process, and that's something that APLU asks for, is that letter of intent signed by that upper level leadership. And we had a question about costs and the payments required. I think we covered those, and those are basically the access costs. So APLU members, if you are an APLU member, you do not pay those rates. You can go directly through APLU, and it's a value of the APLU membership. What this program does through UEDA is provides access to that same program for those that are not able to be APLU members. As I mentioned earlier, APLU has some stricter requirements as it pertains to their members and membership. And their dues structure is much higher than that of UEDA's. So it somewhat balances out whenever you consider that. But if you are an APLU member, yes, go and talk to the folks at APLU, both Sheila Martin and Shailin Jyotishi, and they will be able to guide you through the process as an APLU member. It's a very similar process. We share very similar calendars, the same deadlines. This just provides access to those institutions that are not able to participate in APLU, and gives you access to that same program. So I would encourage you, if you're APLU members, to talk with them. Those are all the questions that we have that I see here. Appreciate everyone hopping in and staying with us. If you did happen to hop in a little bit delayed, please feel free to reference the webinar that we will archive. So that'll come up on our YouTube channel later on. We'll make sure that we share it to our social media channels as well, in case anyone missed it. We want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to see it. Again, if you'd like the opportunity for us to conduct a webinar within your institution or within your economic ecosystem, we're more than willing to do that. I'm happy to do that at any time. We're also happy to have you reach out to us, both APLU and UEDA, to have that initial conversation to provide you any support in order to help launch this idea and concept within your institutions. And then ultimately to start the process. You know, again, if you're looking at joining in 2021 in that cohort, please do not wait until September because it really pushes the timeline. Start that process now as much as you're able, those discussions now. It's a great time for us to do those internal webinars. So please start that process now and make sure that we're not behind and you're able to get everything in before that, ultimately that December 1st deadline. Thanks for joining us today, and please everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you, Sean, too. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Tim. Take care.